Hey traders, welcome back to Valarizo Capital. On today's episode, we're going to go through the market update and we're also going to take a look at some of the stocks and some opportunities for next week. Remember guys that this video is for informational purposes only, is based just on my personal opinion and is not financial advice. So let's start here with the video, and remember guys that if at any point of this video you find any value on the information, remember to subscribe to the channel. So I'm actually making this video on Sunday. Futures just open, so we're gonna take a look at some of the price action. And I was traveling during the weekend, so that's why I didn't upload the video as I usually do on Saturdays. But let's start here with the info. I just want to share some of my thoughts going into next week, what is the expectation, and of course cover some of the information that we talked about in the last video. So let's jump really quickly here into the SPX. And then we're going to take a look at the futures, because I think that the patterns are really clear on the futures market. So let's take a look at the SPX first. And let's go back to what were the hypotheses that we created last week. And basically, we were talking about this level in the SPX. We were talking about 5,300. Remember guys that we were talking about the possibility of this level acting as support. Remember guys that we were talking about Fibonacci levels. We were talking about the previous breakout level. We were talking about the 21 exponential moving average on the weekly chart. Remember that we were talking about the possibility of that 21 exponential, or this one is the 20 SMA, which very similar to the 21 exponential, acting as a level of support. So that was the thesis that we were creating last week. What is interesting is that, of course, we had this crazy price action in the markets. A lot of it had to do with what happened in the Nikkei, right? So I'm very sure that you guys are already familiar with what happened. We had this collapse in the Japanese markets, a lot to do with the carry trade, the Japanese bank raising interest rates, and a lot of liquidation happening on funds that were over leveraged in some of these trades. But that's kind of other kind of information, so that's not the topic that we're covering. But a lot of the move that we saw last week on the markets had to do with that trade. So it's actually really interesting to see. Right, if we jump back to the SPX really quickly, it's actually really interesting to see that we were talking about this 5,300 level, and of course we had a really strong move to the downside at the beginning of the week. But then what we did basically is we reclaimed the level. So I do think that this 5,300 level will continue to serve as possible support here. Now the question is, what is the expectation for the market? So these are my thoughts. This is what I think about the market. A lot of people are calling for a collapse. Given that we are in an election year, given the seasonality that we tend to have, given that we are on the path to rate cuts, given that path is not going to be just one rate cut, we're going to have rate cuts going into the middle of next year, perhaps even longer. I do think that there's going to be a little bit more strength in the market. And of course, we have to take it day by day, looking at the charts. I don't think that we're going to see a crazy collapse, at least not for now. But of course, that's just my personal opinion. And let's take a look at the price action. So what is the price action telling us? Pretty easy, in my opinion. We reclaim this 5,300 level in the SPX, and most importantly, we reclaim this anchor VWAP. So the anchor VWAP that you're seeing here, which is the orange anchor VWAP, it's going to be, and let me just hide the 5 daily moving average that I have here. So let me just hide it. That way we have a cleaner chart. So that anchor VWAP that you're seeing is going to be the anchor VWAP anchored from the swing high that we had on this day right here before the move to the downside. So that tends to be a really strong and important anchor VWAP, because it is the anchor VWAP from the last swing. Now you can see right here that we were rejected on this day right here, and then we got rejected again. And what is really interesting is that we reclaimed that level on the past couple of days. That was on Thursday, and then on Friday you can see that we held that level. So I do think that as long as we continue to hold this level right here and we don't move to the downside, then most likely we will have a really nice move to the upside at the beginning of next week, most likely in the first couple of days. I am looking for this level right here, somewhere around 5,450, perhaps even to 5,500. The thing is that as soon as we get a movement above this anchor VWAP, what is basically saying is the average price paid from that level right there, the average participant is already making money. So it makes sense that shorts are gonna cover until we move to the next possible level of interest. That's how the markets move. That's what I really like about the anchor VWAP, because it really is, as Brian Shannon says, which is as a lot of people know, Brian Shannon has wrote extensive books about the anchor VWAP, and what he basically says is that the anchor VWAP is the best sentiment indicator in the market, and I agree with him. I have been using the anchor VWAP for a while, and as soon as you reclaim this level, then it makes sense for shorts to continue to cover until you get to the next level of possible resistance, and that's going to be the anchor VWAP from the top, which is right here. So I do think that we're going to get a little bit of a move. And what is really interesting is that that anchor VWAP coincides with that 50 daily moving average. So if we happen to get that move early on the week, I do expect some resistance, and perhaps after getting that move, then perhaps we're going to get some nice shorting opportunities, but I don't think that we're going to make new lows. But of course, we have to take it day by day. This anchor VWAP from the low is going to be a really important level, right? Perhaps this anchor VWAP will continue to rise. Perhaps we move to the upside and then retest that anchor VWAP as support, and then we continue to the upside. Or perhaps we break that anchor VWAP and then move to the downside. So I think that it's going to be really easy to find a pattern. I'm going to continue to use the anchor VWAPs as my guide. So that's going to be the expectation for next week, guys. I just want to keep it really, really simple and really, really short. So I do think that we're going to see a little bit of a bounce, but I do think that there's a high probability of seeing resistance. Now, if we happen to lose this level right here, then perhaps a move to the downside. It's possible, but of course, look for this anchor VWAP, and you can see how amazingly this anchor VWAP has acted as support. And let me just change my drawing tool here. You can see that how this anchor VWAP acted as support here, then we acted as support here. So it's clearly a level that has been acting as an interesting point for buyers. So that's gonna be it for the market. Maybe we can take a look at the UVXY, which is the proxy for the futures of the VIX futures, which I think that give better patterns than just the VIX itself. And what is really interesting is that we had this giant move to the upside in the UVXY, which basically is the VIX futures. And let me just show you this right here, because the anchor VWAP is such a powerful tool. You can see right here that we had this level right here. If we anchor a VWAP to that level, you can see that level acted as support here, acted as support here, and then you can see that we had these really strong moves to the upside. Now, what is really interesting is that we lost that level of support. So I do think that even if we get a move to the upside, then perhaps that anchor VWAP is going to act as resistance, and then perhaps we're going to see continuation to the downside in the UVXY, which will mean a continuation to the downside in the VIX futures. So that's kind of the idea and how I'm seeing the market going into next week. So now let's talk about setups. Let's take a look at some of the setups that I'm going to be watching. And as of now, it's going to be really tough because the market already had a really interesting move. And if we jump to the ES futures, we're going to be able to see those patterns a little bit better. And what is really interesting is that a lot of people, when we had this move to the downside, right? When we had this move to the downside, a lot of people were talking about a possibility of retesting the lows. And I actually think that we already did, right? You can see this strong move that we had on the futures market, which happened overnight, and that's why we don't see it on the SPX. We happen to retest that level. And if you jump into an hourly chart, let's just jump quickly into an hourly chart here, or a 65-minute chart, you can see how we already retested these lows, right? Of course, we didn't test them all the way to the downside, but you can see right here that we had the move. We have this move to the upside, rejection at this anchor VWAP, and then we're basically holding this really interesting level here right at 5,200 in the futures markets. So basically, we already tested that level. We found buyers, we make a higher low, which is actually pretty powerful. And now you can see that we have this really nice cup and handle. This very tight price action looks like the type of price action that is going to break to the upside. So that's my opinion going into next week. I wanted to show you that pattern on the futures market because I think it's really clean. So that's going to be kind of the expectation. So let's talk about setups. One setup that I really like was Meta. a little bit extended, so I don't want to lose some of the time of this video in that name, but you can take a look at some of these setups. The Qs look interesting, right? You can see right here that the Qs basically pretty similar pattern to the SPX. I do think that if we happen to get a continuation to the upside, most likely we're going to test this anchor VWAP from the top. Of course, that's going to be a really short-term trade, but I do think that's going to be an opportunity. Pretty similar setups on the SMH, right? Where you can see right here that we had this move to the downside. When you get these kind of, right, usually what happens is that if the base does not break pretty quickly, and instead of that you start to get these hammer candles at that anchor VWAP, you tend to see a reversal base. So I do think that very likely we're going to see a little bit of a reversal in the SMH. Look for that anchor VWAP from the upside to act as a possible level of resistance. I do have a position in Tesla. I do think that Tesla is forming a really nice flag right here. We have this move to the downside, but if you take a look to the left, we are basically retesting this base right here. I really like this hammer candle that we had, and we're basically just flagging at that hammer candle. I do think that there's a possibility that we're going to see a continuation to the upside. I'm not expecting for a really strong move, but perhaps we're going to be able to test that 20 SMA that is coming from that is actually curling a little bit to the downside, but I do like that setup. Now, some other speculative setups. I do like AMD, kind of a similar setup to Tesla, but of course this is going to be a reversal setup. You can see right here the pole. You can see a little bit of the flag. I like that setup as well. We can take a little bit a close look to NVDA, which is going to be pretty similar. You can see that we had that move to the downside, but a lot of these names are consolidating on that top range of the move to the downside that we had. So I do think that there's a possibility that we're going to see a little bit more of a short covering bounce in the market going into next week. And then of course, if you like, the Bitcoin is actually looking pretty cool. So let me show you really quickly. I don't want to make this video pretty long, but I do think that Bitcoin is actually starting to look pretty interesting here. We had this move to the downside. We actually did take this low, but you can see right here that we reclaimed that low and we came back into that 20 SMA and that 200 daily moving average. And now we're seeing a little bit of a pullback in Bitcoin. But some of the level that I'm watching is going to be this anchor VWAP from this low. If we happen to come back to that level, I do think that that's going to be a really nice opportunity to get some exposure on Bitcoin. Or if we happen to undercut this level as we are doing right now, and then perhaps have a candle that holds that level, I do think that then perhaps we're going to see a little bit of a flag and a continuation to the upside. So take a look at Bitcoin, have it on your watch list. And one name that I really like trading as a proxy for Bitcoin is going to be MicroStrategies. So this one is looking pretty nice. Kind of the same setup, right? We had this move to the downside, then we had the pull, and now we're having the flag. So let's see how it opens. Perhaps MicroStrategy is going to open a little bit to the downside because of what is happening with Bitcoin right now. But if we happen to get a little bit of a hammer candle in this anchor VWAP, I do think that there's a possibility for a move to the upside. So those are going to be the names that I'm going to be watching for next week, and that's kind of the outlook that I have going into next week for the market. So thank you so much guys for your time, and I will see you on future videos. Take care and bye bye.